I still check the locks twice before bed. Not because I'm afraid of being taken back. I'm a citizen now, licensed, established, with a home that has my name on the deed and a family that chose me. I check the locks because some lessons don't leave your body. They settle in your fingers, your breath, the way you wake at 3 a.m. convinced that someone is coming to correct you, to cure you, to take you to a place where the person you are is treated as sickness. My father taught me that love is conditional. That family is a courtroom where he was judge, jury, and executioner. That my body was evidence to be weighed, my desires were testimony to be dismissed, and my existence was a verdict he intended to overturn. He did not teach me that freedom is a door you build yourself, that family is a garden you plant with your own hands, that the woman who survives conversion therapy becomes the architect of spaces where no one is corrected. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You don't know me yet. You don't know about the electroshock, the isolation room, the women who became my family in a place that called us sick. You don't know about Isabel, or the adjacent houses, or the lavender I send to funerals I don't attend. My name is Lucia. I'm 34 years old. And this is the story of how my father put me in an asylum for being gay and how I built a family he cannot enter, a life he cannot comprehend, and a freedom that outlasts his laws. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're new here, this is where we tell the truth about families that call love sickness and call cages care. If you've ever had someone try to pray your truth away, if you've ever been told that who you are is something to be cured, subscribe. We have stories for you every week, and we read every comment. Here's my story. I was 14 when I knew. Not with words, words came later, borrowed from books I hid, from websites I accessed at internet cafes, from the slow accumulation of language that named what I felt. At 14, I knew with my body. The vertigo of watching my piano teacher's hands move across keys. The inability to breathe when Anna, my classmate, laughed with her head thrown back. The absolute certainty that the boys my father approved of polite, wealthy, destined for careers in law and business were furniture. Nice furniture, well-made furniture, but furniture nonetheless. They occupied space without generating heat. I didn't tell anyone. I had learned, without being taught, that my family was not a place where truth survived. My father, Don Ernesto, was a judge. Not the kind in robes on television, the kind who administered justice in a system where justice meant order, where order meant the powerful remained powerful, where laws were written to protect property and tradition rather than people. He spoke of the family as others spoke of God, a supreme authority, unquestionable, eternal. My mother Sylvia was a ghost. Present at dinners, at church, at the functions where her beauty and silence complemented my father's authority. I never heard her raise her voice, never saw her contradict him, never found evidence that she had desires, opinions, a self that existed before marriage. She was the perfect hostess, the perfect wife, the perfect mother, perfect in her erasure, her accommodation, her survival through invisibility. I learned from her. I learned to perform, to accept the boys my father invited to dinner, to dance at quinceañeras with partners I didn't choose, to smile and nod and plan my escape in the silence between sentences. I kept a diary not hidden well enough, as it turned out, where I wrote about Anna, about my piano teacher, about the future I imagined where I could breathe without performing. I had boyfriends. 3 of them between 15 and 22. Nice boys, appropriate boys, boys who kissed me and felt my body go rigid, who attributed my tension to shyness, to inexperience, to the virtue that made me marriageable. I kissed them back, closed my eyes, imagined Anna's hands, my piano teacher's smile, any face that made the performance bearable. At 22, I was in university, studying psychology, ironically, the study of mind, of self, of the very thing I was hiding. Anna was in my cohort, not the Anna of my diary, but an Anna nonetheless, dark-haired, sharp-tongued, unafraid. We studied together, argued about Freud, shared cigarettes on the library steps. She had a boyfriend. I had my performance. We were friends, or I told myself we were friends, until the night she kissed me. It was raining. We were in her apartment, studying for exams, and she leaned across the coffee table and kissed me with the certainty of someone who had been waiting for permission. I froze, then I melted. Then I kissed her back with 14 years of accumulated hunger, 22 years of denied breath, a lifetime of wanting finally given language. We were together for 6 months. Secret, of course, her boyfriend was cover, my friendship was explanation. We met in her apartment, in dark corners of campus, in the bathroom of a cafe where no one from our world would enter. I wrote about her in my diary. Detailed, passionate, the kind of writing that makes sense only to the person who shares your bed, your body, your becoming. The maid found it. Rosa, who had worked for my family for 15 years, who cleaned my room, who was loyal to my mother, who believed she was protecting me by delivering the evidence to the person who paid her. I don't blame Rosa. She was trapped in the same system, performing the same survival, making the same calculation about who held power and who needed protection. My mother found it first. I saw it in her face at breakfast, the pale stillness, the careful avoidance of my eyes, the way her hands shook as she poured coffee she didn't drink. She didn't confront me. She gave it to him. The ritual of silence, broken by passing the burden upward, to the judge, to the authority, to the man who would decide my fate. My father didn't shout, he didn't hit. He was a man of law, not violence at least, not violence that left marks. He read the diary in his study, door closed, while I sat in my room and listened to the silence of my life ending. When he emerged, he was calm, terrible in his calmness. "I've called Dr. Morales," he said, "a specialist. He'll help you. This is not your fault. It's a sickness, like any other, treatable." I didn't understand. Not then. I thought therapy meant talking, meant understanding, meant the slow work of becoming that psychology promised. I didn't know that specialist meant conversion therapist, that treatment meant erasure, that my father's law extended to the medical establishment he patronized, the Catholic university that trained doctors who believed desire was disorder. Dr. Morales was 50, soft-spoken, with a cross on his wall and certificates from institutions that later lost accreditation. He spoke of gender confusion, of unnatural attractions, of the family structure that God intended. He recommended outpatient therapy at first, weekly sessions where I discussed Anna until I learned to discuss her as mistake, as phase, as evidence of trauma I couldn't remember but he was certain existed. I performed. I learned to say what he wanted, to describe Anna as experimentation, to attribute my desires to father absence and mother overattachment, and other fictions that made sense to him. I thought desperately that performance would satisfy him, that I could say the words without believing them, that eventually I would be released to resume my secret life. But Anna left. She couldn't bear the performance, the risk, the knowledge that my family knew and would not accept. She transferred to another university, another city, another life where I didn't exist. I don't blame her. Survival is individual. She chose hers, I was denied mine. Without Anna, I became depressed, not performing genuinely. The depression was evidence to Dr. Morales that the treatment wasn't working, that I needed more intensive intervention. He recommended San Rafael, a center for family mental health, he called it, residential, supportive, where you can focus entirely on healing. My father agreed. My mother said nothing. I was 22, legally adult, but in my world legal adulthood meant nothing when your father was judge, when your family was institution, when your survival depended on their support. I was taken at night, not kidnapped, escorted by men in white coats who were not doctors, by a vehicle without windows, by a process that felt legal because my father had made it so. I was not committed by court order. I was committed by family decree, by the authority of a man who administered law and believed himself above it. For your own good, my father said as the door closed, to protect you, to heal you, to make you the daughter God and your family deserve. San Rafael was not a hospital. It was a prison with medical pretensions. Walls, guards, rules that governed every moment: when to wake, when to eat, when to speak, when to be silent. The patients were mostly women. Young women, old women, women who had been inconvenient to powerful men. Rebellious daughters, disobedient wives, promiscuous girls who had been raped and blamed. And us, the sexually confused, the gender disordered, the women who loved women and were therefore broken. I met Marta first. 19, interned for rebellion. She had kissed a girl at a school dance, publicly, defiantly, refusing the shame that was supposed to follow. Her family was wealthy but not powerful, able to afford San Rafael but not to ignore scandal. She was loud, angry, unbroken in ways that made her dangerous to the system and necessary to me. Then Rosa, 28, married by arrangement to a man she tried to love, discovered with her lover a woman from her church by her husband, who sent her to learn while he installed his mistress in their home. She was quiet, strategic, the kind of survivor who observed before acting, who collected information like weapons. And Elena, 16, the youngest, the most broken, raped by an uncle, pregnant, blamed for promiscuity, sent to San Rafael after a secret abortion that her family called miscarriage. She didn't speak for 3 months. When she finally did, it was to ask if we believed in God and if so, how we explained him. We became family. Not by blood, by necessity, by recognition, by the shared understanding that we were not sick, that our treatment was torture, that our survival depended on each other. We shared food, smuggled between rooms. We held hands in the dark, not always sexually, sometimes just contact, reminder, proof that we existed in bodies that were ours despite everything. The therapy was conversion. Talk sessions where we described our sinful desires, where counselors guided us toward healthy attraction, where we were rewarded for performance and punished for truth. Electroshock for resistant cases, not full convulsion, but enough to hurt, to associate desire with pain, to create the Pavlovian response they wanted. I learned to survive. To say what they wanted, to take the medication and vomit it later, to use isolation, the punishment for noncompliance, as meditation, as strengthening, as the space where I could be honest with myself even while performing for them. I learned that survival is not resistance. Survival is persistence, the refusal to become what they want, even while pretending to. Marta taught me to hide medication under my tongue, to spit it out later. Rosa taught me to read the staff, to identify who could be bribed, who was sympathetic, who was dangerous. Elena taught me that brokenness is not permanent, that the girl who didn't speak for 3 months could eventually laugh, could plan, could dream of a future beyond walls. We loved, some of us. In the darkness of rooms without locks, knowing the risk, knowing that discovery meant worse punishment, longer stay, more intensive treatment. We loved not because love was resistance, but because love was survival, the affirmation that we were human, capable of connection, worthy of tenderness in a place designed to make us believe we were neither. 14 months. I counted them in marks on my bed frame, in the growth of Elena's hair, in the seasons that changed beyond walls we couldn't see. I performed so well that I was given privileges: outdoor time, supervised walks, eventually unsupervised work in the garden. I used these privileges to plan, to observe exits, to calculate the distance to walls and the height of fences. But I didn't escape. I was released. Not cured, graduated, they called it, as if we were students rather than prisoners. Released because my father's investments failed, because maintaining a daughter in San Rafael was expensive, because my younger sister was approaching marriageable age and the family's resources needed to be redirected. My father collected me himself, drove me home in silence, the judge presiding over my case without jury or appeal. At home, he presented the terms: employment in the family business, an approved boyfriend, marriage within 18 months, children within 3 years. Prove you're healed, he said, and we forget everything. I agreed, performed, waited. 4 months of gathering resources, money, contacts, the address of Marta, who had been released 2 months before and disappeared into the city. 4 months of pretending to consider approved suitors, of attending church, of being the daughter they wanted. Then I left. A Tuesday, ordinary, unremarkable. Packed a small bag, took the money I'd saved, the contact information I'd hidden, the photograph of my mother that was the only thing I wanted from that house. I left a letter: I am not sick, I am absent, and my absence is my healing. I didn't look back, not at the house, not at the city, not at the country where my father's law reached. I crossed to Mexico, then to the United States, without papers, without plan, with only the certainty that anywhere was better than where I had been. The journey was brutal, not dramatic grinding, exhausting, the slow erosion of dignity that is immigration without documentation. I worked everything: cleaning offices, washing dishes, caring for elderly people who didn't ask about my papers. I slept in shelters, in garages, on sofas of women who recognized my silence as kinship immigrants, survivors, lesbians who had their own stories of escape. I studied at night. Obtained equivalency, then enrolled in nursing school, working days and studying evenings, sleeping in 4-hour shifts that I measured in caffeine and determination. I chose psychiatric nursing, ironically, the specialty that dealt with the system that had held me, that I understood from inside, that I wanted to change. At 30, citizenship. The ceremony, bureaucratic and moving, where I swore allegiance to a country that was imperfect but allowed me to exist. At 32, licensure as a psychiatric nurse in California. At 33, a position at a community health center, running support groups for survivors of conversion therapy, and Isabel. She came to my group at 36. Mexican-American, architect, divorced from a man she had tried to love because that was what family expected. Mother of 2 children: Diego, 8, Sofia, 6 who she was raising alone with the guilt of having failed at marriage, of having damaged her children with divorce, of being confused about desires that had never included her husband. She was still trembling, still believing partially that her inability to love him was defect rather than orientation, still carrying the weight of family expectations, Catholic guilt, the narrative that women exist to accommodate. I was her facilitator, not her lover. I listened, validated, shared my own story only when it served the group, not when it served my loneliness. We talked after sessions, then coffee, then walks where she spoke of her children and I spoke of my empty apartment, and we both pretended not to recognize what was forming. It was Isabel who named it first. "I'm not confused," she said, one evening in the shared park between our neighborhoods. "I'm gay, I've always been gay, and I'm terrified." "Of what?" I asked. "Of being seen. Of my children being seen. Of the life I could have versus the life I should want." I took her hand. Publicly, deliberately, where anyone could see. "The life you should want is the one where you can breathe," I said. "Everything else is performance, and performance kills." We moved slowly. Adjacent houses, not shared space for her children to adjust, for her to process, for me to demonstrate that I was not another person who would consume her autonomy. A shared patio, a connecting gate, the architecture of relationship that we designed together rather than inherited. Diego and Sofia became mine. Not by law, their father contested, unsuccessfully, using her orientation as weapon, a strategy that backfired when the court recognized it as the abuse it was, but by presence. By bedtime stories and school pickups and the slow accumulation of trust that cannot be forced. Isabel's exusband became distant, then absent, then a check that arrived monthly without message. We didn't celebrate his departure. We simply expanded, filled the space he left with our own design. My father got sick when I was 33. I learned through distant cousins, through the internet, through the family network that still reached me despite my absence. Pancreatic cancer, aggressive, the kind that takes the powerful and renders them powerless. He asked to see me. Not immediately. I waited 6 months, consulted therapists, discussed with Isabel whether I was prepared, whether I wanted, whether I owed. I decided to go, not for him but for me, to testify, to be visible in the space where I had been made invisible. He was diminished. The man who had administered law, who had committed me with legal precision, was now subject to cellular law that he couldn't argue, couldn't postpone, couldn't overrule. He was thin, pale, still arrogant in the way of men who believe their suffering is unique, their death unjust. "You came back," he said, attempting smile. "I knew you would heal. That family matters." "I didn't heal," I said, sitting, maintaining distance. "I escaped. And the family I built has no place for you." He tried to argue, duty, blood, the laws he had administered and believed absolute. I listened without responding, without defending, without the performance he had trained me for. When he finished, I spoke. "I'm leaving something, not for you, for me, because I survived despite you, not thanks to you." I left an envelope. Photographs of my life with Isabel, with the children, with Marta and Rosa and Elena, found, reunited, also free, with my clinic, with my group. And a letter written 10 years before in San Rafael, in darkness, in the voice of the woman I was becoming. "When I get out, I will be free. Not healed, not cured, not normal, free, and my freedom will be my revenge." He died 2 months later. I didn't attend the funeral. But I sent flowers, lavender, symbol of healing, but also of memory, of the herb that grows in burned ground. The card read only, "For the ground I grew from, not thanks, just acknowledgement." My mother had died 3 years before him. Silenced finally, freed finally, her death unnoticed by me until after. I mourned her differently, not for who she was, but for who she might have been, for the woman erased by survival, for the ghost that haunts my own fear of becoming invisible in relationship. I'm 34 now. Isabel and I live in adjacent houses, connected by a gate we designed together, a patio where we eat breakfast with the children, a life we architected rather than inherited. I run my support group 3 evenings a week. I work at the clinic. I am present in a body that is finally, irrevocably, legally mine. The children call me Lulu, Sophia's invention, Diego's adoption, the name that stuck because it was given freely rather than assigned. They know my story. Age-appropriately, the way we explain complex truths to children. Some people don't understand love, some families are built rather than born, some survival takes time but is always possible. I still check the locks. Still wake at 3 a.m. sometimes, convinced that authority is coming to correct me. Still feel the ghost of electroshock in my muscles, the phantom of isolation in my chest. These are not weaknesses. They are the architecture of survival, the foundation on which I built something else. Isabel asked me once, in the darkness of her bedroom we share space, but maintain separate houses, the design that allows us both breath. Do you ever stop being afraid? I thought about it. About San Rafael, about the journey, about the fear that still lives in my body like a second skeleton. No, I said. But I learned that fear is not danger. Fear is signal that I'm alive, that I'm present, that I'm living in a body that is finally mine. The danger was the place that tried to make me believe fear meant I was sick. Fear just means I'm paying attention. She held me. We breathed together. The children slept in their rooms, in the houses we designed, in the family we built from women who were told they were broken. I am Lucia. I am 34 years old. I have a father who is dead, a mother who was ghost, and a family of women who chose each other. I have locks I check twice, a lavender plant I tend, and a freedom that outlasts every law that tried to contain me. I am not cured. I am not healed. I am not normal. I am free. And my freedom is my revenge, my architecture, my love. See you in the next story.